Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días a todos. Yo soy Enrique de Hoyos, fundador de Muchas gracias por sintonizarnos y bienvenidos de regreso a su Muttcast, el podcast para los amantes de los perros, en donde además de aprender acerca de nutrición canina, aprendemos acerca de salud, psicología, entrenamiento, entre otras cosas. No dejen de visitarnos en nuestras redes sociales, tanto en Instagram como en Facebook, en mod.mx, y suscríbanse aquí a nuestro canal de YouTube o escúchanos también en Spotify. Déjanos saber tus comentarios y empezamos. Hoy estoy muy contento porque tenemos de invitada a Ruby de The Real Dog Box. Y déjenme les platico brevemente. Ruby es pionera en una marca de premios y de masticables para perros en el área de San Diego, California. Así es que vamos a ponernos a platicar con ellos y vamos a cambiar a inglés. So, Ruby, hello, very nice meeting you. Welcome to our podcast. It's a podcast for dog lovers. It's very nice for us to having you here. It's an honor, and I was telling our members that you are one of the pioneers when it comes to natural treats in the U.S. and also chewables and so forth. So it's a company based out of San Diego. I love what you have done with the brand, but more than that, I love why you do it and how you have been educating people and benefiting the life of dogs. So welcome, and would you like to introduce you briefly?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure connecting with so many like-minded dog owners who have our dogs in our heart, their best interest in heart. And it's been actually just an honor connecting with not just people within the US, but outside, because we all just want the best for them. So I appreciate you so much for inviting me onto your show.
Excellent. And can you tell to the people who are listening and watching us, where can they find you on Instagram? Where can they find you on social media? I think it's nice, even if we live in Mexico and you live in the US, I think it's nice to see your webpage and so forth. So where can people find you?
Sure. We are Real Dog Box, real.dog, everything. That's where you can find us. I enjoy following so many people outside of the country because we're all still learning from each other.
Agreed.
I think you and I have been feeding raw food for a long time, but still respect that we don't know it all quite yet.
You know, now that you mention, I follow a lot of people from out of the country as well who make raw food, because at the end of the day, it's kind of a pioneer movement and we're all in the same boat. So, Ruby, I think it's great why you're doing it. And the first thing, I like to get down to business right away, so people who are watching us really have something to take on. So the first thing that calls my attention when I watch the Real Dog Box is all the bones and all the chewables that you got. Some of them are even with fur, right? So you even have cow ears or pig ears, and some of them have fur on it, or rabbit feet and so forth. So just from your experience with all those thousands of dogs that are chewing the Real Dog food, the Real Dog Box chewable, why is it important for dogs to chew a bone?
Absolutely.
So from all your experience, why is it something that they should do? I don't know if it's every day or very common.
Well, there's a few things. First and foremost, I think dental health and mental health are the two things that I look for when I'm looking to explain to someone why their dog should be consuming actual bones and even fur.
Agreed.
Dental health is a huge issue. And if you grew up with a dog and you weren't always feeding a raw diet, you know, doggy breath is a thing, but it really didn't have to be, right?
Agreed.
Everyone's like, oh, my dog's breath stinks, and I love when they kiss me, but I also hate at the same time. But that's because there's something wrong, and it really has to do, number one, with their diet, and number two, with their dental health. We also know dogs have a natural urge to chew. They love
Agreed.
using that sort of energy to chew on things, nibble on things, play with them. They use their mouth as the way we use our hands. So it's sort of like how they feel the world.
Agreed. It's kind of like how we use our eyes and they use their nose, or how we use our hands and they use their mouth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Ruby, from your perspective, when we talk about dental health, but I think it's not talked about enough, and I think it's a very important issue, especially in elderly dogs. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have a senior dog, well, if we have any kind of dog, if we want to have a complete dental cleaning, we're going to have to put the dog on anesthesia, right? Like full body anesthesia, right? And it's not something that's advisable for every dog. Me, from a personal perspective, I don't like full anesthesia for myself, neither for my dog. So there's no other way to clean our dog's teeth other than either naturally or putting them, well, I'm not gonna say putting them to sleep, but sleeping them through anesthesia so we can clean them out, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that that's one of the only ways that people think they can clean the dog's teeth. And I'll tell you, sadly, you know, once they're seniors, because their lifespan is so short, we don't want to have to put them under for no reason. But
Agreed.
I've been running to a lot of people at our local farmers markets and talking to them about bones and about chewing, and they'll say, well, I've got an older dog now and he doesn't have any teeth. And it pains me to tell them there's a reason why he doesn't have any teeth anymore, you know?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a vet once and he told me, if your dog is losing her teeth, the more important it is for her to be chewing bones, because that's going to help them cleanse all their gums and all their teeth, right?
Right. There's a bacteria that's existing in there that's stuck under the plaque, and it's just going deeper and deeper and deeper. And unfortunately, once it gets to a certain point, it's no longer reversible, which is too bad.
Agreed.
You know, but hopefully we are talking about it enough. So when you get a new dog in the household that's younger, you can start preventing a lot of those issues before they happen.
So it's not just the plaque and the tar, it's also the bacteria that goes beneath the gum that kind of rotten the teeth as well, right?
Exactly. Yep. It's to infections, periodontal disease, and eventually having to take all of those teeth out.
And unfortunately, I have seen countless number of dogs who have pretty bad dental health because there's a lot of ignorance out there about what to do or how to do it, right?
Yep, there really is. And a lot of people will try to brush their dog's teeth, and when, you know, your dog doesn't like you putting your fingers in their mouth, they just give up and they don't know that there's an alternative.
Great. So from your experience, Ruby, and with all the members that you guys have, if my dog has kind of like a severe plaque issue on their teeth, how long does it take for them to clean all their teeth? Is it like a month, 2 months?
You know, we start to see results almost immediately after the first chew. And unfortunately, you know, the stage at which you're talking about where it is severe and already below the gum line, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times that's not reversible, and you can't reverse the damage, but at least you can start to stop it. But if you haven't gotten to that point yet, using a chew or something very abrasive, like a raw meaty bone that allows our dogs to really rip the meat off and scrape all of that plaque, which is bacteria, to scrape off any built up tartar or plaque off, you're already removing that opportunity for the bacteria to spread. So we've seen before and after pictures. I mean, after 1 or 2 chew sessions of just like built up nastiness, and you can start to see it chip away, and it's amazing to see.
So when we talk about bones, and I know because you have stated it, there's like very hard chewables, there's semi-hard, and there's soft. When do you recommend each one of them? Is it for different kinds of dogs or different stages, or is it the same for everybody?
Dogs are the most diverse species on the planet, right? So we've got these 5-pounders to 200-pounders, and then you have the age difference, right?
Agreed.
Which accounts for how much a dog actually wants to chew or needs to chew. But my general recommendation, you know, for our products, we have light, medium, heavy, and super chew. I always start with the light chews for the smaller dogs. And just because it has a bone in it doesn't mean that it's a too hard or heavy chew for a small dog to have. But I am cautious as the dogs are younger and don't really have their adult teeth in to recommend a very heavy or a super chew in our case for them until their adult teeth have grown in, unless they're a really big dog.
Got it. So if I have a puppy with their, we call them milk teeth. I don't know how you call them. if they have their first set of teeth still, you don't recommend to give them kind of like a beef hoof, for instance, right? Like a cow hoof.
Right. No,
that'll be
definitely
too hard
not.
for them. Okay.
Too hard.
Okay.
I would stick with a poultry bone, which is light and hollow. In fact, we had a little 6-pound Yorkie Shih Tzu mix in our studio today that was helping us film You Can Feed a Dog a Puppy Bones video. And man, that little thing was chewing on a chicken foot for nearly 20 minutes before.
Really?
He took a nap, a 2-hour nap after that. And barely made a dent in it, but you could see, number one, starting to use those teeth, work those jaw muscles.
Agreed.
Number two, getting used to a natural source of calcium, which is another reason I love feeding whole bones, because our bodies don't absorb calcium the same way a dog's body would.
Agreed.
And there's so many different things on the market: calcium carbonate, eggshell powder. But there's no replacement for a whole bone source, which is going to be the most absorbable and usable bone or calcium for our dogs.
Absolutely. And now that you mention it, I recall once in our store, there was this French bulldog who came here, and we gave them some oxtail. It was raw though, but we gave them some oxtail, and you know how the bone in the middle, it's kind of hard and well, between soft and hard. And he was chewing on it while his dog father was in the store talking to us, and he chewed on it like for 10, 15, 20 minutes perhaps. And after that, he just lay down and he started to sleep right there, because it was so intense, the exercise that he did on his jaw, but also mentally speaking, that he got tired. I mean, he wasn't even running around. He was just chewing. And then after 20 minutes, he went to sleep.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
And a lot of people say, I walk my dog 5 times a day for 2 hours or whatever. And that mental exercise or enrichment is irreplaceable. I mean, 20 minutes of work, mental work is like 2 hours of physical work.
So let's talk about that, because I think people don't talk about it too much. And I think they overestimate how much of a problem solving for the dog is to eat a bone. Does that make sense? Because we kind of underestimate that, but for the dog, it's kind of a problem that they have to solve, right?
Right. No, for sure. I mean, something that I love about the different meat cuts or the different chews we have is the shape. There's the flat ones, there are the round ones, there are the ones
Agreed.
with the jagged edges, and they want to eat it. That's the goal. They want to taste it and get it down. But the harder we make for them, the more they have to sort of figure out how to do it.
Super. So, and then one additional question, because we make raw food for dogs, right? And we have a set of raw bones, and then we have also dehydrated bones. And you have a line of air dehydrated bones. So we all know that cooked bones are a no for dogs, right? It's what I tell people is bones have to be raw, or they cannot be cooked at all. But then let's talk about the dehydration and why dehydrating a bone is not cooking a bone, and what the difference is, and why is it acceptable for us to give a dehydrated bone to or not?
Sure. So the primary difference is the temperature. And I think you guys use Celsius, but I'm going to talk in Fahrenheit because that's fine. What I know. So when we say air dried, our chews do not exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is because the higher you go in temperature, that's when you start changing the cellular structure of each protein and the bone itself. And when we do that, we're also, the act of drying or dehydrating is the act of removing moisture. But when you start cooking, not only are you removing moisture, you're now also cooking out collagen and the elasticity that keeps the bone together. And, our dogs, when you look at their mouths and their digestive tract, we know that they're made to consume bones. But when you take it outside of that natural form and you start cooking out that collagen, that's what makes it very difficult on the system for them to digest. I think if you ask me, honestly, we say no to cooked bones for most dogs. And my firm belief is because most dogs are on a dry food or processed diet, a kibble, and they really don't have the variety in their diet or the digestive enzymes to process a cooked bone if they if they were to consume one, even accidentally. I've
Agreed.
seen raw fed dogs that have accidentally eaten a cooked bone without meaning to, because they're just used to breaking down a variety of food.
Because they're already eating food. They're not eating something that's processed, right?
Right.
And that's what I tell people. It's once you start feeding your dogs real food instead of just one exactly the same processed food every single day, then you can feed them whatever food you want, right? I mean, if you're cutting an apple or you have some broccoli, you can give them because they're already eating, right? And what I had understood also is that once you cook a bone, when they break, they kind of splinter. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think there's
especially chicken bones, I would say.
Sure. And I think that there's a misunderstanding of what that word splintering means. You know, there's a difference between, you know, a bone sort of breaking into pieces like this because it's been cut. And then
Agreed.
There's splintering in the sense of shattering, where it's into these very small pieces that are harder to absorb by the body when they're broken down in that small, you know, size.
And then the last question that I have about bones, so we can go to another topic, but I think it's also very important. I was browsing through your Instagram, and you have one post that I think it's extremely important in that regard. And it says, every time you give a bone to your dog, you have to watch them. And I typically tell people, I mean, the first time that you give a new bone to your dog, you have to be present because number one, you want to know how they eat it and how they behave. And number two, it's an opportunity for a bonding with your dog also, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So what's your recommendation? Do you recommend that every time you're present once you give a bone to your dog?
I think that you know your dog better than I do. And, you know, that it wouldn't be fair for me to tell you how to sort of parent your child.
Agreed.
But I think that the best starting point is every time it's a new sort of chew, to definitely sit with them and understand how it is that they're chewing. I think, you know, we've done something different with our dogs nowadays, and that we offer them their food. They don't really have to work for it. So they know that, you know, we're the person, we are the item of value. And
Agreed.
I do think that there is an incredible bonding experience that you have when you're sharing a meal together. Probably more importantly, and I do have a lot of firsthand experience with this, is if you have a multi-dog household and you're feeding chews or food that is going to be high value to them, I cannot stress how important it is to make sure that they're separated, safe. There's no opportunity to fight over food, because even dogs that have grown up together, you know, that who've never ever had an issue, a very high value item can just change things, you know, right before your eyes. Yeah.
Even dogs who eat from the same bowl on a daily basis peacefully, once you give them a bone or a chewable, it could be hell, right? But yeah. So why is that? What does a bone mean to a dog? What's the meaning that my dog gives to a bone? Because it's not only food, right? It's got to be something else, because they kind of protect it, or they're very protective of them.
Sure. And I don't think it's limited to just bone in chews, but it's a high value item. It's one of their resources. And, you know, we make fun of our dogs trying to bury their chews in their bed. And it's very cute, you know, just nosing their bed and not doing anything. But that's instinctual. I mean, there's a reason why they are trying to save that resource for later. Maybe they're not hungry enough. But I can tell you, they certainly don't want anyone else or any other dog in the house to have it. And, you know, to add another point, just because you are present when you are feeding more than one dog high value items, it's not going to stop an event from happening. You know, like you said, they eat out of the same bowl, and then all of a sudden, but if you're there, you can certainly mitigate any of the damages that might happen, just because you're not in another room, not watching them.
Most definitely. And now that you talk about dogs burying burying the bones. Somebody was telling me the other day that they were in the apartment and they did not understand why the dog was putting a treat underneath the couch with their nose, because and they thought it was an abnormal behavior, but I told them, well, he doesn't have some dirt to dig and put it into it, right? And he doesn't have a refrigerator that he can access easily. So in his psychology, he says, I got to put it underneath. That's pretty interesting.
Storing it away for later.
Agreed. So super. Ruby, another question that I have is, you have a lot of different treats, you have a lot of different chewables, all of them are natural ingredients. And so when we talk about the West Coast of the United States, most of the West Coast is pretty progressive and they are very aware of the benefits of natural feeding to humans. Mm-hmm. Now, for some reason, even though people are starting to awake into the fact that if I eat well, my companion, who actually kind of lives in the same house and sometimes even sleeps in the same bed as I do, they kind of should eat well too, right? But why is it not obvious to people that even though we are what we eat, our dogs also are what they eat, but we don't kind of recognize it? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, marketing is a powerful thing. And so is understanding, it's about understanding consumer buying habits and how they see what they're buying as a reflection of themselves. And, you know, I talk with my partner about this all the time, who grew up feeding raw bones outside of the US. You know, he's from Turkey and his father would send him to the butcher shop, pick up raw meat, feed it to the dogs. That's how they fed them. And he came to the US and it was a status symbol to feed kibble. It was part of showing that you didn't have to share your table scraps with a dog or a companion animal in the house. And I think that quickly is what changed the industry. So there's just this perception that this is better now because it's made specially in a factory for my dog. And there's just this disconnect. And I've been having more and more conversations with people, and surely you've entertained the same when they come into your store, where it's just, well, what do you eat? Do you do you eat out of a box?
You kind of balance your food on a daily basis already, right? I mean, you're not a nutrition expert for yourself, but you end up eating a balanced diet in the long run. And we kind of know that fresh food's better, but for some reason there's a disconnection when it translates to my dog. And we kind of think that the dog is some kind of magical robot or something, that it's not an individual being that could eat the same thing over and over again for the rest of their life in the same quantity also, and with the same ingredients. And that's kind of when you think about it, it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the question I like to ask them is, if it's so good, how come there's not one for us? Like, I would love to carry, a shelf-stable snacks in my pocket all the time and be ultra healthy and live the longest life ever from that. But we know that that's not true.
Agreed. We know that a fresh carrot is going to be much better than something processed.
Yep.
That's pretty interesting. Nice. Good. So other thing that I want to talk to you about, Ruby, is let's talk about the treats that you make, because we talked about the bones. Now let's talk about treats. We also make dehydrated treats. We have 6 or 8 of them, but you have like 1,000, I don't know. And you have some of them with fur, some without, some are fish, some are mussels even, right? You have poultry and so forth. Let's talk about treats for a second. What's the function of a treat, or what's the purpose of a treat for a dog, other than training? Let's not talk about training and tricks and so forth. Let's talk about our daily life.
The reason we're not called real treat box is because it's just real dog food. Treats are food, and we refer to them for their usage. We say treats because we want to reward our dogs for something, or the usage is a chew because we want to help them stay busy or clean their teeth. What we look at in our boxes is just food. It's just a way of helping people add variety into their dog's bowl, but it's not as scary as completely changing their diet to a raw diet. It's more like, oh, cool. I've never seen a pork heart before. I can just add this in.
Agreed. So if for whatever reason my dog's eating kibble, what I tell people is when it comes to a treat, you can give them with no issue, right? I mean, if you have to have some moderation and especially consider the type of dog and so forth. But there's no issue on feeding some dehydrated treats to my dog, even if he eats processed food, right?
No, I've never seen any issue. And in fact, where we see a lot of people whose dogs are unfortunately overweight and obese is they're feeding the correct portions, from their dry food, but they're not counting the amount of calories or fats or starches that might be in the treats that they're feeding. And that's something that's really important to factor in. Just like us, I could eat salad for every meal, but if I'm going to, pick up some French fries in between those, I'm not going to get the results that I'm looking for. So something that we think is really important, I can't stress this enough, like know what it is that you're feeding, because it eventually is part of your dog's diet, no matter how big or small they are.
Agreed. So funny story. Before I started doing all of this, I had my dog Chato, and I went to the supermarket and I was looking for some treats, and I saw this yellow bag. I'm not going to say the brand. I saw this yellow brand with some bacon strips, right? And it has a cartoon dog on the bag, and it has a bacon strip that you can look at. So I bought it, and then I opened it. It kind of smells funny. My dog liked them. He liked them a lot. And then just out of curiosity, I turned the bag. I had already bought it, right? So I turned the bag and I started looking at the ingredients. The first ingredient was corn. It was, so for me, that was eye-opening, because I was thinking that I was feeding some kind of meat to my dog because it's a bacon strip, but at the end of the day, there was no meat in it. It was just corn, some kind of flours, and flavoring and coloring and preservatives and so forth. So I was thinking that I was feeding something real to my dog, but I was not. And the list of ingredients that they have, and I want to talk about it too, because one of the things you say, it's one ingredient. When I look at the treats, at the processed treats at the supermarket, or even some kibble, the amount of ingredients that they have, it's out of this world. It's like 40, 50 ingredients for a dog treat. That's unthinkable, isn't it?
And you know what's even crazier is a lot of those ingredients are in processed human food and banned in other parts of the world. I mean, the UK has this long going list of all the things that should not be, even if it's a pre-packaged or processed food, it should not be in there. It's not
like
healthy
VHA and VHT, right? They're forbidden in the European Union because they're cancer driven in this part of the world in which money is a bit more important. They're not forbidden.
Right. Yep.
Unfortunately. Good. So, Ruby, another question that I have for you is, how did you start doing these for your dog?
Well, we started our dog on a raw diet.
Okay.
I didn't grow up with a dog. Everyone finds this so surprising. And so when we got into looking into dog food, it was very obvious that there was something wrong with the industry. And I actually had a very similar experience that you did, getting a dog as an adult, which is, oh, I got to go get dog food, go to the store. I'm in the laundry detergent aisle with cleaning supplies. This is weird. Okay, well, this bag looks nice. It has grilled chicken, medallions on them. And I pick up the bag and I'm like, cool, grilled chicken, turn it over. What are all these other things in here? And I mentioned to you earlier in our call that I actually had a few years in the legal field, and that's what I did before I started making dog food. But what immediately came to my mind was, is this legal? This can't be legal. How could there be grilled chicken breast on the bag? But that's not what's in it. And sure enough, I didn't have to do a very deep dive. It was very obvious that many companies were getting away with this sort of marketing approach because they know that people don't want to spend a lot of time looking at what the best food is because there's just too many options. So you pick the prettiest one or the one that a friend of yours is feeding, and you go with that brand, right?
I agree. As a matter of fact, when I first had Chato, the first bag of kibble that I bought it because I liked the bag, to be honest. I didn't know anything about it, and so I can empathize with people who do not have exposure. And for some reason, the big kibble brands don't want us to have a lot of knowledge. They kind of prefer us to have us in the dark a little bit when it comes to how their food's made, kind of like the sausages and so forth, right? So they want to have us in the dark so we don't ask questions. And then the reason why I'm asking you this is I wanted to ask, how is the perception on the general population about the raw food diet in the US or in San Diego? What are you seeing? Because we have seen slowly, not as big as a paradigm in the last 7 years. The one question that I used to get all the time was, is my dog going to become aggressive with the taste of blood? For example, right? One out of many barriers. What's the perception of people in the US or in California about raw food?
Well, what I'll tell you is when we first started, most of our customers were raw feeders, and they were looking for clean treats to complement their diet, organ meats that they couldn't source, that they knew had to be part of that, the components of their diet. Now we're about 6 years in, and it's actually a very small percentage of our members that are raw feeders. They're actually mostly kibble feeders, and they, I think, are open to this idea of feeding raw. But as you said, the processed food industry has sort of kept us in the dark as to what's good and what's bad. And I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing in the fresh food industry with other raw feeders or people that know what they're doing, they're keeping a lot of that information gated. They're saying, oh, if you want to feed raw, you have to get a meal plan from me. Otherwise, you're going to do it wrong. And it's not really encouraging them to try it on their own. So I think that there's that fear of not doing it right. But I do agree with you that they're a little bit more open-minded about adding variety into their diet because they're starting to make that connection. I can't eat the same thing every day. I would be bored eating the same thing every day. My dog must not like, and he gets so excited. But I'll tell you the one thing that I am starting to see a little bit more than ever now that we're doing farmers markets and those face-to-face meetings and connections is my dog has a sensitive stomach, and it's difficult, but we have to tell them that's because you're never changing their food and they're just eating the same thing all the time.
Yeah, I was thinking about it either today or yesterday, and I think it's kind of an epidemic. Dogs who have digestive problems and dogs who do not want to eat. Even it's more and more common every day. Dogs who do not process their kibble properly and they're not getting enough nutrition out of it, or dogs who just plainly won't eat it.
Right.
And then comes the important part about the treats, because one thing that we didn't mention is most of your treats, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of your treats are offal meat, right?
They are, the treats are.
And there's a reason for that.
Well, they're the most nutrient dense part of the animal.
There you go. But you know that, and I may know that, but the regular father or mother of a dog, they don't know that. We tend to think that meat's meat, right? And what's inside of the animal, it has the same nutritional properties, but nobody has told us that even though lean meat is pretty rich in protein, doesn't have a lot of vitamins, doesn't have a lot of minerals, because those are in the organs. And that's the reason why when we have a dehydrated treat, it's kind of like a superfood.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's literally a superfood.
What's actually funny about that is back in the day, these organ meats were considered delicacies. You know, they were because you could get a whole arm or a leg from a mammal, but there's only one liver, you know, there's only one heart. And nowadays, for whatever reason, it's something that people are afraid of eating. And so we're finding it in abundance, and it's cheaper meat. And you know, that we can get our hands on, but people are afraid to feed it because they don't eat it.
And I usually tell people, when I was a kid, my mom used to do chicken broth, right? Or chicken soup. And she put the chicken liver and the chicken heart in the soup, but you cannot find them any longer in the supermarket where I live, because we have walked away from awful meat, and they tend to be a cheaper meal because people don't, I guess people don't like the strong taste. But what I tell people is that strong taste, for instance, in the liver, it means copper, it means iron, it means B12 vitamin. And I mean, there's a reason for that smell, right? And the dog, they interpret that, they're able to interpret that smell as vitamins and nutrients that my body needs, because they have not been as exposed to artificial flavoring as we have.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've seen.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's why so many successful trainers that train dogs who are food motivated, they know what kind of treats to carry.
Agreed. Yeah. Super. Excellent. Ruby, it's been very, very nice talking to you. Let's give a message to all the people who are watching us, and let's give a message to all the people who are listening to us. What would you like to say to those people who are listening to us or that are watching?
I think the main takeaway here is you've heard us talk about the benefits of fresh food over processed food, and we don't want to and shouldn't have to convince you why one is better than the other, because everybody listening really knows the truth. I think the message is it's not as hard as you think. And there are people like you and I that are here to help you. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the question, will raw feeding make my dog aggressive? Will raw feeding, make my dog sick? We're here to answer your questions. So just reach out.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise, my message is, and I always tell our members, the more educated our members are, the better it is for us. So for me, an educated person, it's much better than somebody who's not been educated, unlike the kibble industry, in which they prefer people who do not have a lot of knowledge about dog nutrition or dog food, because they know that if those people are going to walk away from kibble or process.
Right. Yep.
So,
yep.
Ruby, thank you very much. It's been an honor talking to you. I really love your brand. I follow you on Instagram every day. I follow the stories. I hope we can do another session later on. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I'm Enrique from Mutt, and Ruby, if you want to say goodbye to our followers.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on board. I hope we can meet in person very soon. And thank you for what you're doing for the dog community as well.
Thank you very much, Ruby. It's a big thank you all the way to San Diego, to you, to your partners, to your followers and members. I think I like the videos that you guys upload, and hopefully we'll meet in person and we can exchange some ideas. Thanks for everything that you're doing in San Diego for the dogs, and I think we're in the same journey. So
yeah.
Thanks a lot.
I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Let's talk soon. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.